And welcome back to the Flow Sports Fix on this Thursday evening. What a day it has been sports-wise with everything going on. We'll chat with the stat man soon, get some AFL tips for you, however that may be. And also Ellis, our world game guru, will talk about the A-League, some good things there, some interesting things too. And we'll find out about some of those, including a chat about the Champions League. We'll get a preview. Who's going to win, Man City or Chelsea? I'm leaning towards Chelsea myself, but maybe I know Ellis is going to pick Man City, that's why. But we'll find out more when we chat to him a bit later in the hour. It's time for some local football with the Flowman, and first looking at some go-to rounds taking place this weekend across SA country leagues.
We start in the western part of South Australia, and we're having a look at the Western Air competition. The go-to match, I think, is Wirrala taking on Thevenard. I think it'll be the closest of all three games. I reckon Wirrala could still get home on their home deck. The other two home sides, Western United playing Kinniba and West Coast Hawks playing Blues, I think should get victories on the weekend. For those on the rest of the peninsula that are in our coverage areas, it's interesting to see that there are buys for both Elliston districts in Great Flinders and for the Central Air United side in Eastern Air. We'll go to the matches for northeastern football, and there's no game here that really catches you as the go-to, but BSR I think should beat North Clare at home at Brinkworth. I reckon Min-Man will travel up to Burra and beat the BBH Rams, and the Southern Saints go to South Clare at the Clare Oval, and I reckon they should get a win, the Saints, and Blythe Snowtown play RSMU. I've got a feeling that the RSMU boys might be a little bit too good there for northeastern matches. In Barossa Light and Gawler, go-to matches here are plenty. Anguston wanting to respond to last week's shock loss to Gawler Central. They play Kapunda at home, and certainly a bit of moisture underfoot. I reckon Anguston will get there. Barossa Districts at Williamstown, they take on South Gawler, and I'll tell you what, South will be too good here. The two Tigers, these two may be evenly matched in this game, and up at Nuriutba it's going to be a tough one, but Gawler Central from last week's form, they might just be the go-to side on this one. And Tanunda play Freeling. I can tell you now that it'll be a very one-sided contest up at Tanunda with a big win to the home side. Across the York Peninsula, some go-to matches here. I reckon CMS Crows playing Butte is a really big one at Karamulka. And what about Ardrossan and the Southern Eagles? That could also be close at Ardrossan. Kadina and Central York, I reckon the Bloodhounds at Kadina can win, and Parsky I think will beat Wallaroo in the other match. Heading down into other parts of the state and now to the Mallee League, and we've got a go-to match for this one. It is top-of-the-table stuff. Well, almost. Pinaroo are on top, and BDT at their home deck at Canalpin. I'd love to go to this match, that is for sure. It would be a big, big game. I reckon Pinaroo can inflict some pain on the Crows. Karoonda take on Lamoureux, and Murrayville take on Peak in the other two games. In the K&T, looking at some go-to here, Bordertown and Padthaway. And Bordertown Roosters can really put to the big recruiting mission that Padthaway have put in place on ice. Bordertown, I think, can win this at home over the Tobin Cox-led Lions. Keith Play Border District should win at home. Kaibi and Mundalla, a battle of the Tigers, but it will be Mundalla. It is Narracourt and Kingston, a go-to if you're in that part of the old Cowrie-Narracourt region. Kingston might have something to say on this go-to, and Penola and Lucendale, two evenly matched, and I reckon Lucendale have got to respond after some indifferent form in recent weeks. In the mid-southeastern, the go-to match for everyone at Robe is at home, and Port Macdonald, the two battle of the two port towns. I got a reckoning that the Robe Roosters might be a go-to for this one. While in Riverland football, three good matches, but I think Waikerie playing Renmark is a go-to for that particular league. And Loxton North and Loxton, a bit of the derby coming out there in that Berry play Barmera Monash in the other clash. Go-to for those in the old Mid-Murray League, Blanchetown Swanreach take on Sedan Cambrai. Old rivals, near neighbours at Swanreach. What a good match that'll be. Sedan Cambrai should get home. Ramco and Cobby is probably the match of the round in terms of the teams. Who knows what Cobby can bring this week. They've been good for the last couple. And then Paringa play Wonka in the other match. In River Murray, go-to football. Ramblers play Maipalonga for a place in the top five. Then Manning play Tailem Bend. Meningie get Jervois at Meningie. Meningie had a win last week, but I think that that might be the end of their run. Go to football across regional South Australia. Looking forward to the results, and also looking forward to you watching these go-to predictions across on our Flow News 24 channel, also at Flow Sports on Facebook and up at the YouTube channel Flow News 24.
So from go-to games, we can go to NSA to some no-go games in Victoria and New South Wales. Flowman.
Yeah, it's a strange one because obviously news breaking from this morning when I was on air that the Victorian government has said that the statewide restrictions now are in place. That means that you can't have any more than 5 people from the same family, and I guess one-on-one go out to do physical recreational activity. Yeah. So it means that all of our competitions across regional Victoria will be no longer taking place this weekend. It does also create an interesting situation for those that play into New South Wales. Of course, that means that those competitions where you've got cross-border between the two states, so the Sunraysia has teams in New South Wales and the Golden Rivers likewise, and you go right down through to the Piccola and also the Central Murray. These are the comps that are all affected, but in New South Wales, interestingly, the Hume Football League this week had programmed a bye.
Oh, wow.
So even though they're not
psychic.
They're not affected by the Victorian shutdown because all the clubs are actually based in New South Wales. But the interesting conundrum is some of the clubs like the Billabong Crows and also CDHBU have players that do come from Victoria to play over the border in New South Wales. So the bye has come at a very good time for their competition. And the other two comps that we have a casual look at each week are the Riverina and the Farrer. They're both obviously clearly in New South Wales. And my understanding at this point is that the New South Wales government is not obviously making any decisions about shutting down any of its competitions. And likewise over in South Australia, that is the case too.
Flowman, just a couple of questions on it. Okay, this round, for all these teams in Victoria, are they classing it just as a bye round, or are they going to be rescheduled, or are they just going to class it as a draw? What's the situation? Because I'm sure we need to know. Yeah.
Information's still to come.
Okay.
At this point in time, so for argument's sake, on the border of South Australia where Murrayville play into South Australia, the Murrayville Bulldogs can't cross the border. In fact, actually, they're playing at home. So the South Australian players effectively can't go and play in at Murrayville. They could, but Murrayville people are not allowed out of their houses. So I'm not sure that South Australian people are allowed in there either. So that's a different conundrum in itself. But over in, say, Horsham District, Sunraysia and Wimmera Football, North Central Football, there hasn't yet been an edict as to, from each of the leagues, what they will do, whether they reschedule, whether they have a drawn situation. I think that there'd be a range of different options, but the clubs would be pretty disappointed if you're coming up, say, looking for a Final Four position, looking at this game and maybe playing against the bottom side and maybe percentage being a thing. Yep. I reckon it has a real impact on your fortunes for the rest of the season. So you'd hope that they delay matches, maybe rejig the draw in order for it to maybe be shortened up by a couple of weeks at the end. Let's hope this doesn't go on beyond this week's games and go into next week's games, because I mean that would be very, very difficult. But on something else of interesting news in the North Central Football League.
Oh, you've got a scoop.
Oh, well, not so much a scoop. It's been pretty common knowledge that Witcher-Proof, Narraport and their voters, their general meeting was held earlier the week, and that they had voted to a yes, that if Charlton voted yes that they would amalgamate, Charlton have actually voted no. Oh. And so they don't wish the Navy Blues to join the D's. 30 kilometres up the road, they've decided to go it alone. And so I've had it from the Witcher-Proof Narraport Club that they will continue as Witcher-Proof Narraport, and for the foreseeable future, they would look at other options as they become available into the longer term, is their way of saying it. So they were looking at the amalgamation. There was just looking at the future, they've said, which I think is a fair comment. And at this stage, obviously, I think there'd be a bit of disappointment about the place that they hadn't been able to get this amalgamation up. 2 years ago, they had a meeting with Nullawil to do likewise and couldn't get that one up. So it just seems Witcher-Proof, with no junior teams in the under-16s or under-13s in football, have decided that they'll continue with their netball and hockey in junior grades, but no football. And for the foreseeable future, will continue to play in North Central without junior teams, albeit that 14 of their junior boys, we're led to believe, do actually play at Charlton. So it's interesting. Do we assume here that Charlton are saying no, but will keep taking the players? And then that forces Witchy-Proof's hand, because do they then have to entertain an amalgamation elsewhere? And if I just through the casual view thinking here, Bort is up the road about 45, 50k from Witchy-Proof. Quambatook is also in the general region. We mentioned Nullawil, that failed to get up in a past era. And, of course, or does Witchy-Proof, I guess, look at how it can go in recruiting, maybe in looking at how it could get players on loan from other clubs? I don't think those are options, and I think Witchy-Proof realises that. But sadly, I think across the board, apart from the Charlton members, I don't know that there's too many people that didn't think that this would go ahead. I think we're all a bit surprised, to be honest.
Can you fathom their reasoning why they said no?
I think that they just like the Witchy-Proof club at some time to fold, and then the players would more than likely come their way, because the view would be that it's unlikely Witchy-Proof players would go northwards and play further out for Nullawil or out in that area, because Nullawil goes to Hay to play its football, which is 3 hours away virtually from Nullawil. So I would suspect that that's what it's more about. But I think Witchy-Proof can be proactive. If Charlton aren't saying yes, then they can be proactive here and say to their community, well, get out and support us. We're going to remain going. We will look at options for the future, and if it's Bort or if it's Quambatook or if it's Nullawil or if it's something to do with another club in North Central at some point in time, we are going to need to, for the foreseeable future, we can go like this with no juniors, but at some point this is not going to continue. We're going to lose senior matches of football without having any good juniors coming through. We're going to lose matches in the future.
And if you want to know more, just go to our Facebook page, Flow Sports on Facebook, and you'll get the scores, previews and updates, especially with this current issue too. We'll find out more about it. Thank you, Flowman, for giving us that update.